I've collected wine for 40 years now. So that's passion. And then I moved into art about 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Started slow with things that were kind of simple landscapes, and progressively as I learned more about different types of art. And again, you're coming down to art as a massive media, right? But we focus down to visual arts, and mine is mainly oil, watercolor, and then some other medias that I like. I started out with landscapes, and then have finally moved into more modern art, so to speak, which is very fascinating. We collect, I should say, Jane and I, we collect a lot of North Carolina art, some of the top artists in the state right now, several of them born here. And it's just been a little niche that we think, they're all living still. So we'll just see how it goes.
All right. Well, let's take a little step back for the people who are listening to the podcast.
Sure.
Please pronounce your name correctly for me.
Oh, okay. Scott Sullivan.
Great. Where do you come from? I mean, I know a little bit about you, but give me a little bit of background. Like, were you raised, were your parents into art or anything like this?
Well, yeah, sort of. My dad was. He collected print art.
Mm-hmm.
His passion was birds of prey. So we had the big bald eagle, the Guy Koliak, who's still a very prominent wildlife artist. I can't remember the other fellow's name.
Audubon.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. John Audubon. When we had prints, Audubon prints that were, they're still around here somewhere. I don't know where they are, but they were nice. My mother really didn't care about it that much, and nobody in my family really cared about it. I was an athlete when I was a kid, and grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, then went to Tulane University, where, got into food and a little bit of art. I liked art in college, so music as well. Studied classical music a little bit and still love that. And so got out, started collecting wine, and then now I've moved into art.
Okay. So you mentioned when you talk about art, that you collect generally sort of, we'll call it like two-dimensional works generally. So it's more that line than three-dimensional necessarily.
Well, no, I think, that's the beauty of it, is that there are the depth. And that's one of the things that I attribute why I like it so much, is that my vision is incredibly good. I have 20/15 vision. I have great peripheral vision, and the depth, I have a great depth of field vision. I can't read without glasses.
As we all can't at a certain age, yes.
But so you look at a painting like that right there, and the depth of it, you get the clouds up close versus the clouds way off, and the fact that there are all these little images, and you can take little pieces of the painting, and they're it's like looking through a pane glass window, right, where you have little pieces that make a neat little scene, but it's part of a whole painting. So
one of the things I'm really interested in when it comes to collectors, because I'll define you as a collector, just so you know. Okay, the is sort of, how did they even, how do you approach when you want to collect something? So what are some of the criteria when you're looking at, let's say you go to a gallery and there's a dozen different artists being presented. What are the things that attract you to one versus another?
Well, it's interesting because it's like wine and it's like investments. You need to have a strategy. You need to have a thought process and then stick to that, right? Because, you can go into all different types of genres of art, and all of a sudden, if you've got a collection and it doesn't, it's just a bunch of different pieces, that's not necessarily a great collection, right? Even though they may be great pieces individually.
Yeah.
So
my family's like that.
Yeah, you get to certain themes. So, for instance, I like one artist who he doesn't put any buildings. He takes his scenes are like Walden, where there's no, some of his humanity has not touched many of his scenes, right? Mm-hmm. And that's artistic license, right? And that's great. So then you look at it from the standpoint of, there are different aspects to that. For instance, he paints by daytime. So he'll put 8 o'clock on the side of his painting, and then he'll do that every morning and see the nuances in the landscape. You can see the humidity in his paintings.
I was going to say, the light is matching the light quality. Correct. Every time he works on the same piece kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And so then there's another artist, his work is modern, and it doesn't matter. The exterior, the outdoors don't matter to him. It's all, and he layers it thick and then slices it off, and it comes out, and the images are just immense. It's just the whole painting is speaking to you with different things. And people laugh at some of the stuff that Jane and I, we look at a painting and we see these things and we show it to people and they go, God, I never saw that. But it was really funny. And of course, the artists probably don't think it's that funny, but it's just one of those things that you see so many. So when I was a kid, I'd look at tree lines and you'd see, dragons, the pine tree looked like a dragon and all that kind of stuff. And then we had a telephone pole next to our house. The little wire that was the ground looked like an elephant with a trunk, right? And so I'd just look out the window, and as the moon or whatever came by, it was awesome.
You mentioned like midlife crisis and all this kind of stuff, and having already been a collector of other things, basically. So what brought you from collecting wine? Like, why did you change? Did you complete your wine collection, or have you stopped wine?
Oh, no.
Okay.
We still
doing wine.
Yeah, and there are other reasons right now, especially. Art is a store of value. I mean, so, for instance, when some of these painters die, there'll be no more paintings, obviously. And so you all of a sudden you have it's kind of like Bitcoin, right? There are 21 million Bitcoins going to be out there. That's it. Okay. If one of these painters has done 1,000 pieces, that's it. So it's a store of value if the artwork in itself is good in the first place, right? It's like gold, silver, whatever. I mean, they're all store of value. If you look at the way money's been passed down from generations, it comes in different things.
Sure. Now, okay, when different people come to collecting art in different ways. Correct. So, like, it's my preconceived idea is that there are sort of people who love the art and don't care about the value of it per se.
Right.
And then there are people on the other side that maybe it's not like the most important, but they take into consideration the potential increase in value over the time. Yeah. So I'm going to assume, because I know you're very business minded, that it's probably more a little bit more of the potential return on investment or potential increase in value.
Or store of value.
Yeah.
Or the store of value.
The historic value.
No, the store of value. It stores. So, for instance, in 1933, when the stock market crashed and everybody was poor, some art was still very valuable. You could take it someplace and trade it to somebody for some money, just like silver or antiques and things of that nature. So it's just so that's part of it. And so it's actually three things, I would say. You talked about it, and I was thinking about it this morning. And so there are some things that you just like, right? Like that painting right there. You can't see it, but it's just fun, right? And it's beautiful, and she's done a great job. But there's no value there necessarily. But it's part of my collection, and I loved. She did a little still life over here, and
feel free to mention the names of these artists. By the way, you've been saying he and she.
Yeah, well, I mean, do you want
absolutely?
That?
Yeah,
okay, well.
Yeah. People love to know, like, because listeners could then look up that person,
right?
So they could be like, oh yeah, okay, I could see why they like that,
right? Okay, yeah. So there are those things, and another media that I like is pottery. So we've gotten into pottery a fair amount because of Seagrove, North Carolina, and then Penland. So we have a house in Boone. You go to Penland, and it's just it's one of the awesome things to do to go see these young artists doing this fantastic work. And
okay, but that's a thing that I always wonder about too. So like as a collector, so you're looking at your collection, because you even talked about this as sort of as a whole. So you're right. Trying to create a sort of are you creating like a thematic, or are you create like, because you talked about North Carolina, so is it is it a genre, like a geographical thing, or is it a style thing? Like, so what, when you're in your mind, you're thinking of the thematic idea of your collection, what would you define it as?
I would say that the thematic, there are two things. It has to be able to be deep. Okay, depth has to be there. Meaning, you can't collect somebody who's only putting out 1 or 2 pieces a year. So it has to have some depth to it. Secondly, I would say would be, to some degree, people painting in North Carolina right now, and painting and maybe a little bit of pottery. And then thirdly, it's just things that I like in general. Like there are the themes that, woods, for instance. We have a 10,000 acre farm, and it's got the most beautiful woods in eastern North Carolina, if not North Carolina. And so it's an old hardwood. So just the colors and the images of that, as light changes, as various things change, it gives you a wonderful feeling inside that it's just there. It's nature. It's very simple, right? It's kind of simple. Now, on the other hand, the modernist I like is Herb Jackson. Herb was the director of art at Davidson College. Actually, Ann Brennan went to Davidson, and Herb was her mentor, I guess. But anyway, so Herb's art is not that. Okay, it's a different dynamic. But once you get into that dynamic and it has depth, and you see things over and over again that work. And so and he's from North Carolina, born in North Carolina, went to state, did all this, but he's fantastic. So,
okay, you've used the word depth a couple times. Now, do you mean, I understand that you were talking about like the visual nature of it, like seeing things in it.
Yep.
But as artists, again, like I'm a practicing artist myself, sure, and also a teacher. So I'm always wondered, we've been taught recently in the past 30 years or so that we have to like write about our artwork, so write our artist statements and things like this.
Sure.
From your perspective as a collector, are those important?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's very interesting because I've always had, I think that art during the maybe late 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s was very angst driven, right? And most of them, they had some sort of angst in life, and so that's where the art statement comes in. And I would have to say, having met most of they don't have that angst to their work. It's much more of a deeply, in my opinion, a more intellectual, like John Bierman with colors. His colors are just, when you get, they're just amazing in how he gets those different colors. And so it's really interesting. There's another fellow named Richard Fennell who went to ECU, and I think he taught there for a little bit. But so we have a farm, I told you, in Hyde County, where we have, it's 10,000 acres, and it's beautiful. And Hyde County is just basically sea level. Okay. When you see the colors in the marsh at varying times during the day, because it's so flat, the depth of the sunlight, the depth of as it goes down, up and down, and all, it's just amazing to see the colors that are pulled out of the marsh and the water. Because, if you're in the mountains, you've got a small window of that sunlight that creates different properties for the painting or for the subject. And up there, it's just, it's not, that's him right there. So you can see that color purple right there in the sky,
which none of the listeners can see, but I can see it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's
absolutely. You
can see, and so you see his colors it's just a colorful painting. But so anyway, that's a couple of the folks that.
Right. Okay. but again, the question about like the text. So basically, okay, if you were, well, how do you buy your artwork? So let's go back a step. So like, do you walk into galleries?
Yeah, I have galleries that represent most of the artists.
Well, but how did those relationships get made in the first place? Like, did you find the gallery? Did you find the artist? Did they find you?
Yeah, I found the artist, and then I met the gallery. There's a gallery in Greenville, City Art Gallery, Tari Stroud, and she represents Tuttle May. She's you know her.
I do know Tuttle. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's great. Got a lot. She's another one that I'm venturing out into modern things because she does some great work in a modern. And so I had looked up a painting by John Bierman, and Tari had that, so I went in and met her, and we've been friends ever since. And so she represents some other folks that I like. And then there's another gallery, the Art Cellar in Banner Elk, North Carolina.
Okay.
So they represent Herb Jackson, for instance. So we got to go meet Herb and, tour his gallery. I mean, his workshop, which is just fabulous. I mean, it's unbelievable. And you see how people work, and it's a great, and it's a positive space. It's a very positive space. You go in there and you're excited. You're not like, and he's excited, and so it was really interesting. Anyway, so those are the two galleries. I've bought some things other places.
Don't do any auctions or anything like that?
I have not.
No. Okay.
So again, you have the depth, right? So you come back to, let's use John Bierman because he was one of the first ones I collected. So he's been painting for 40 years, right? And so that's part of the depth as well, getting some of his early works, if you're any type of artist and you're not growing, even a musician, right? I read something about Brandon Marsalis. He's the saxophone player, and so he New Orleans. So I have a affinity for jazz, and he was saying, he's now that he's 60, he's learning so much more about music because all of it's just starting to sink in, and he's got this, to use a technology term, this massive platform of music that he grew up with, right?
It's the wisdom of age and experience.
And so you look at that, and same thing with Herb and everybody else.
Oh yeah, I look back at my own stuff when I remember thinking I was making amazing work when I was like 30, and I now look back at it and I'm like, what crap did I? That was so bad, in comparison to sort of going to you, like the depth of what I'm making now, like the richness of experiences that are behind it, the techniques that have grown and gotten better over age. Like we always think back to like Picasso, like everybody thinks of Picasso as this great masterful art. Well, when people are thinking of Picasso, they're thinking of the work he made like after he was 50 years old.
Correct.
So it's not that he was a master his entire life and his entire career, but the stuff we know sort of puts him in that realm. So a lot of times some of the greatest artists don't make their best work until much later in their life.
Sure. Well, musicians the same way. And
Absolutely.
Composers, when you think about it, you have the theme. You have basically a theme of your music, and it's the same thing to see how they've grown that original kind of, how that original kernel of thought that they first put on paper, and then how it got to where it is now. It's really fascinating.
You mentioned the idea of like buying multiples from an artist kind of thing, like, and so I wonder about collectors these days, because there's the old days of patrons where like they would choose an artist and they would buy from them regularly and sort of support them. So how do you just buy like your favorite piece by an artist and then just go to another artist, or do you continually
I continue.
You do? Okay. So like what?
Well, it's like wine. So it's interesting that you bring that up because it's really fascinating because. So in wine, when you collect wine, you collect a specific
vineyard.
Right. So I have a collection of Dominus wine, which is Christian Moe, who did Chateau Petrus in France, one of the most famous wines in the world ever. And so I have a collection going back to 1982 or 81. So I have all his wines in a big collection. And if you read, it's really interesting because if you read about wines these days, the popular thing is to go, oh, well, we'll try Christian one day, and then we try this the next day, then try that. There's a whole world out there. But if you do that, then all of a sudden you're trying to please too many people, right? And if you're going to have a collection that's going to be worth something, it's going to be focused, right? Because the person who's going to buy it wants to be focused. So it's just really interesting. And you learn these things. So one of the things, Jane's brother, Matthew knows Jane.
Jane is his wife.
Yeah. And so Jane's brother was a musician.
Really?
And we brought in a bunch of musicians to play with him, professional. Jack Bruce, who played with Cream, he came. Buddy Miles and Billy Cox, who were the original Jimi Hendrix band, or the Band of Gypsies, I guess it was. And all these musicians we paid to come in, and we produced this album of all the music that Bruce wrote. Well, I didn't really pay attention, and the album it had 4 different genres of music, right? And so he was trying to see which one people would bite, and then he'd create more. Well, it ended up being a flop because, people didn't like the opening thing, but they liked the third thing. And then, so trying to he tried to figure out how to get a genre rather than taking a genre and running with it, because that's the way. And so that's kind of the way I look at art, is you develop your collection around a specific, either person or theme. You have to have those themes, and each of them have a different theme, but in general, we get back to this North Carolina. So just having fun with it.
It sounds lovely. I wish I had the ability to do it. I mean, how many, so as of today, so we're in December 2020. How many pieces have you collected? How large is your collection these days?
Holy moly. 500.
Wow. Okay, that's large.
Yeah.
And do you have everything you own on display, or do you have things in storage?
Very few in storage. Very few in storage. It's all on display.
Okay.
We have, just for your information, at the Cameron Art Museum, we have Manu by Herb Jackson. Have you seen Manu?
I did. Yep.
Wasn't that beautiful?
That's how this whole connection sort of started.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? So Manu is a ecological. It's for ecotourism, right? And it's in Peru, and so he painted there, and and these are the fun things that you learn. And I was talking to him about John Bierman, and we were just talking about, and so he says John has a lot of green. He goes, I've never liked green, but I was in Manu, and there's no way to get around green. So, he had to paint some green in there because it was a jungle. Anyway, so it's kind of fun to, talk about those sorts of things. And
well, artists often talk about how they're influenced by their environment.
Yeah.
I think about in times when I had smaller apartments, I worked smaller. When I had bigger studio spaces available to me, I would work bigger, kind of thing. And so
Correct.
Everything from color to scale to all these things affect how how artists approach their work, basically. Yeah. Now, so do you have a thought pattern on scale and things like this? Because that one you were just talking about is really quite colossal in size, whereas that's not really something that could fit in a home very easily, let's say. So do you, when you're approaching potentially buying some works, do you think about scale? Is that important to you? Do you want it to be relatable, or are you looking for what are some of the characteristics that are interesting to you?
Yeah, I think scale is a very big consideration. For instance, our stairwell has a huge wall, and so we have 2 Herb Jacksons in there. They're not collectively; they're probably almost the size of, but it fills the whole wall, so it just gives it a scale there that you can sit and look at that whole, You just sit across the hallway and with a chair and see the light coming in and the different media that he has in there, because he uses pumice and sands and other minerals,
micas and things like that,
and all that kind of stuff. So it's really good. When I was a kid, I read a lot, right? And during the summertime, I had my favorite couch, and so I would just sit there on the couch and read all day, right? Well, that's my reading couch, and there's at the end of my vista there is one of my favorite little paintings, right? So you know it works perfectly right there. So it's like this perfect little gallery. Obviously, that one's out of place right now, but we're getting ready to redo the office here.
I mean, people often, like my artwork, when they buy mine, they always give me like, oh, we put it in our bathroom, and they sort of think it's an insult.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you kidding? Right. Everybody goes into the bathroom. Like, that's one of the places of honor in a home, because everybody sits there for a decent amount of time at some point or another.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, everybody will see that piece of art that was put in the bathroom. I mean, I understand for humidity and stuff, it could be bad for certain types of art.
No. I hear it's funny because that's exactly right. My bathroom, I have some favorite pieces in there, right?
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah, I know.
Sure, and the space is perfect, and so I don't want it overwhelmed, but it's something that you can sit there and look at and get a feeling for, what the scene or whatever.
Indeed. So. No, okay. When you're collecting, so like a little bit of nuts and bolts of it, because you're a businessman,
right?
Do you have, like, in your mind, do you have a budget when you go collecting, or do you just like fall in love with things? Like, how do you, not like financially, I don't want to know how much money you're spending or anything, but like, do you go in with I'm not going to spend more than this amount of money, or do you go in with, I want to fall in love with something? Pretty
much, if you fall in love with something, you're going to buy it. So, but yes, I have a bunch of budgets in my head, right?
I'm sure you do. I mean, you run businesses. I know
right.
You have budgets always in your head.
The wine is similar. I always know I have like a limit, right, that I try to keep up with, and sometimes go over, and sometimes I don't buy stuff for, a couple of months. And so, and same thing goes with art. I'll go quite a while, usually at this time of the year, without buying things. And
I was gonna say, so like, is this something? So do you collect on a regular basis? Like, do you buy a new thing every month, or is it a seasonal thing?
Just kind of when you see something, right? So, for instance, tomorrow I'm going to go on the way to Hyde County, which is outside of Washington, North Carolina. Sometimes I go through Greenville. And so I'll go through Greenville tomorrow and see Tari, and we'll talk about various things, and probably end up buying more pottery or something like that, just to fill out some of she's got some nice pottery and glassware and stuff like that. These are all, like, there's my little teacup.
Mm-hmm.
It's all from somebody that, the potter that, I like and like their work.
Oh yeah, so you do sort of that patron idea. So you find somebody you love,
sure,
and you continually buy from them, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
I love that. I wish more people did it.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it, and like their works, and so that's kind of where we are with the collecting. And of course, Jane is a painter. We had a bunch of her paintings in the mountains, and we had this huge wall. So one time when she was here in Wilmington, I went and got all her paintings and put them on the wall. It was an emotional experience for her. She said, I never thought, that much of it. And I said, it looks beautiful. It's great. Watercolor. She does a little painting in oils and other things. And she's awesome with needlepoint. I mean, very, very intricate artwork. So that's kind of, so we're having fun. She loves art, obviously. And when we met, some of the artists, we let them come stay at our house and paint. And so
people come to the house and paint.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Yeah. If you want to
the new house?
Go to the mountains. Not the new house yet.
Okay.
But in the mountains, we let them go there. And then I think John Bierman is going to come to Hyde County, and he's going to the mountains in January. And then trying to get him to go to Hyde County in the springtime. You know, Herb's not, he
doesn't matter.
It's not a change of venue for him, I don't think. I mean, obviously when he did Manu, that's a big deal, but and not to say that he doesn't get his things from outside, but his work has to be done in his studio. Mm-hmm. It's big.
In the beginning of our talk here, you mentioned something about like learning about how to look at art and buy art and all this kind of stuff. How did you learn that?
Reading and
what did you have some advisors, some assistants?
No, not really.
Nothing? No outside help or anything?
Not really. No. I mean, I read a lot. I told you I read a lot. So I read a lot about the various artists. I read for years about architecture just because, we do buildings and we do stuff and land planning. Land planning is an art. It's a really, and we've done some really bad art and we've done some good art. And, so anyway, it basically, when you start out, in my opinion, you look at the simple things, right? It's color, it's lines. Mm-hmm. Like Richard always has things at just a tad bit of an angle, right? So it just gives it the lines, and Tony Griffin does the same with the lines there. They're just, and so when you're farther away, that looks like a modern painting, but when you're sitting right here, it's the ocean, right? And so shapes, all that, it just, the thickness of the paint, everything goes into the overall painting. So it's a very complex situation.
Okay, a lot of collectors I know started off though, like buying like prints, like you said, your dad did, and then and maybe like then photographs, and then sort of growing into paintings and other sorts of things like this. So did you sort of enter into it at sort of a entry level?
Yes,
kind
it did.
Kind of thing, and then
it was real simple scenes like that. That was Napa Valley
printmaking.
Yeah,
so you started with books on paper.
Well, just water scenes and things of that nature. And then I have a friend, we were friends in college, Amy Jackson Dixon, who City Art represents her. She lives, I think, in Denver now. But I bought some of her paintings early on that were scenes from New Orleans, right? Anyway. Oh, the Napoleon House was a little cafe, and it was always great, muffulettas and things like that. And so Amy used to paint a little bit of that, wine bottles and things of that nature. And then she's obviously progressed. It's really fascinating to see what she's done in her life, moving into some more modern, abstract art, and then moving back and forth, and how the colors have changed. It's just really interesting.
Sorry, it makes me think about my own work. I've grown into a bit more abstraction.
Send me some of it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I used to be very representational, and now I'm getting more abstract. But now I'm fighting against that abstraction to go more so it's that balancing act of like, too far, not enough, so on.
Yeah, it is, but I think that's great. I really do. I think that's great to have those.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
Sometimes the more abstract is really beautiful, and sometimes it's just basically overworked.
Yes.
Is what it ends up being. But.
Yeah, always. That's one of the things that fascinates me. Is I remember in Amadeus the movie, and Salieri told Mozart, he said, too many notes, right? And so how do you know what exactly is? How does Herb know that's the last spatula he's gonna? It's so
Well, I run into it a lot where like I think I've overworked something, and then like a collector or a curator will come in and say like, this is my favorite piece,
right.
And I'm like, but I hate it,
right.
But they love it. And then the one that I love, nobody else likes,
right.
And I don't understand that. I'm so bad with that, but that's so be it. It's the nature of the industry. Is everybody's very subjective about how they look at things.
Correct. Yeah.
So, Now, okay. Over the longevity of this, so like what's going to happen You know, you're not young, nothing personal.
Right.
You know, what's your plans? Do you have the plan? Because I've had some previous guests on the podcast talking about like estate planning and things this. Like, so do you have expectations of passing it on to your family, or is it going to be, have you made any arrangements for like collections to be donated to museums and things like this? Like, is this something you even think about?
Oh, sure. Think about that kind of stuff all the time. I mean, that's what, it's just part of my job. Don't know. Probably try to keep the collection together.
Oh, is that important to
maybe
you?
Create a foundation that then lends to or is a subsidiary of something, so that the collection goes together, because it could be something significant one day. Mr. Cameron collected ducks, decoys, and so we're giving the decoy collection to the Cameron Art Museum, and it's worth a substantial amount of money. So,
well, that's interesting too. Wait, because part of your life is being married to Jane, and you inherited a collection also a little bit, didn't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. He didn't collect much art though. His was ducks, and Louise, I can't remember. She really didn't collect much.
Yeah.
They had a few pieces that were very nice, mainly print and mainly wildlife print art.
Mm-hmm. Well, like my family's getting old, and they have an eclectic collection.
Yeah.
And like you were talking about earlier about having like a cohesive collection to be able to, either hold together or donate one place or pass on, whatever. My family is very eclectic. Like they've got like one random piece by random things that they just fell in love with. And I started thinking about like, how could I donate this to a museum or put it together as a collection? And it really can't, because like we've got stuff from Morocco and Russian Georgia and like all over the world, Portugal, and like things don't match at all. And so like no single museum or institution is going to want everything my parents have.
Yeah. And that's kind of the issue, really, when you get down to it.
It really is, because like now I'm like, what am I supposed to? We have like a William Blake and like a Leonard Baskin, and a Matisse print. Like, I mean, they just have no relationship to each other, and there's no cohesion. But we love it. It's our family collection.
Sure.
But we would never be able to give it to an institution because it's not cohesive in any way whatsoever.
Correct.
So I mean, is that something that you think about? Is like trying to get
absolutely.
a cohesive idea?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you're gonna give it to a museum, for instance, and they want to show, if it's an eclectic collection, people will come see Herb Jackson, right? You put it in, and so you have to have enough pieces to make it interesting for the venue. So like John Bierman's that was one of the things that I was at the Cameron Art Museum when it first opened, and they borrowed one of his paintings from North Carolina Museum of Art. And I was with a good friend of mine, and he said, that guy is going someplace. So
that would be what, 20 years ago now?
Yeah, at least 20 years ago.
Years ago.
Yeah, 20.
Yeah.
And so it's been interesting to see how John's come in and out of those, things, and know about his life and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, something that I'm always fascinated by, mostly because I'm really bad with this. Okay?
Right.
So like, this is one of my it sounds like from the conversations you're expressing to me is that like, you are building relationships with these artists that you are buying artwork from.
Sure.
So how important is that relationship in the nature of like choosing to continue to collect? So not just buy one piece, but continuing to support and collect them.
I like happy people. I mean, in general, right? So if why can't artists be happy? Why do they all have to be, stuck in a snit?
It is such an interesting thing that artists are thought to be like this.
I remember meeting, I think it was Dorothy Gillespie, and she was just a delightful lady. And I said, yeah, gosh, this is great. It's not this, oh my God, I woke up this morning and it's just this thing bothering me, and that, you're going, woof.
Oh, I know. I've run into a lot of people that complain about, especially like older, bitter artists, like the one who haven't been successful in their career, and they get really, why is that young kid getting so much fame? Get like bitter and angry. But not all artists are like that.
No, I know. I know. I mean, I get it. I just enjoy meeting them and hearing what they've done, and it's really, because if you're going to get into it, you might as well get in, deep down into it and understand, kind of what their background is.
Well, okay, and that sort of leads on to the point of like the story behind the work or the artist.
Right.
Like, are these kinds of things the things like, because basically what I'm trying to figure out for you, because like I don't know the answer to this, I'm trying to sort of learn from you, is like, why do you choose, let's say, so it's not about, let's say, the individual art piece, but why do you choose an artist to support? Like, what is it, something about them?
Well, it's mainly about their work, sure.
Okay, it's about the work first.
Yes, work first.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
And you don't collect anybody who's an asshole. Like, they have to be a nice person.
I don't know that I have any in here like that, right? But I haven't met them all.
Okay, fair enough. It is quite possible. Well, because like
now, Richard Fennell is he's the mayor of Whitsett, North Carolina. I don't know what So if you're a mayor of someplace,
you got to be
even though
nice.
there are only 40 people there.
All right, where were we? Oh, people being assholes.
Yeah. No, as you get older in life, you just don't want to deal with that. I mean, I understand that everybody's brain works differently, but I just try to live a positive life. Worked hard that way, trying to make it more positive every day.
But no, it totally makes sense.
Right.
Like, I mean, like you work in construction and property management, like, so you're not going to hire somebody who's not enjoyable to work with.
Right.
Like, so like, why would you buy art from somebody who's not enjoyable to buy from?
Sure.
Like, I get that. It's one of those things that artists oftentimes don't think about it as a business, basically, sort of like as business relationships. They think of it as like, oh, it's my soul, and like, oh, you must understand me, I'm a tortured artist,
right.
kind of crap. But it's really, to a certain extent, it's business. Like,
right.
I mean, you be a good person, somebody else does their job well, on time, efficiently, whatever,
right.
And trustworthy, all the kinds of things that you would say for any business associate.
Well,
art's the same thing. It's at a certain point. This is one of those, like, at a certain point, like, basically when it gets to a gallery or to the point where you're seeing it,
right.
at that point, it's more or less a commodity. It's just a thing that's going to have a transaction happen.
That's it.
It's not a personal, expression
Correct.
of blah blah kind of thing.
Right.
But so many artists get bogged down in that crap.
Oh yeah, they get a big ego.
They do.
We do deal with a few of them, but
yeah,
I don't mind a big ego. It's the nastiness that I don't like. If people get,
nobody likes it.
Yeah, right. I wouldn't think so.
I don't. No. Okay. How do you find new artists? Do you rely on your gallery, or do you find them on your own?
No, typically I find them on my own. I go down, I look at there are several websites out there, Mutual Art, ArtNet, and then there's some galleries that I purchased a couple of paintings from that send catalogs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the e-newsletters and that kind of stuff, yeah.
Finley Gallery in New York that sends a lot of stuff. And then there's another gallery when we were out in California in the desert there, Palm Springs,
mm-hmm.
and they send a lot of stuff. So you look at what that is versus what you're doing and determine whether you want to branch out or find a new artist or...
Well, because my wonder is a lot of artists are always, and for that matter, a lot of galleries are always sitting around saying, like, how can we find more collectors?
Yeah.
So the question is sort of like, how do people get on your radar? So, like, you are a collector.
Right.
And everybody wants your attention.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, and you have to be nice. I mean, like, do you get, like, unsolicited things sent to you? Or
yeah, there's one sitting right over there.
And does that ever work?
Typically not.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
No, it's just one of those things that, and it's always a pain, it's just, that's the way it is. Now the museum, the Cameron Art Museum does this thing called State of the Art of the State,
mm-hmm.
where they let everybody bring their artwork in. They put it all up on the wall.
I know.
And it's great. It's great. It's great fun. And it's just, it gives you so much perspective on people about, we had another time where the previous director, Ren Brown, and a friend of mine's wife was an heiress and had quite a bit of money, and she wanted to, somebody to come look at her artwork, and Ren came back and goes, "Oh my God, it was like a 3-year-old."
Oh yeah.
So, and it's hard, do you like my work? And ooh, poof.
It is difficult. I mean, and that's sort of what I go.
And that's the other type of person that's the problem, is the one that, knows they have good art, and you go, well, it ain't that great.
It's difficult. Like, I think that there's a balancing act, which I'm horrible at. So, like, I'm not saying, is of the great art and a great person. Like, so, like, fun to hang out with, interesting stories, whatever it is. Like, the thing that makes not only, like, the art interesting, but like I find it, okay, so like, here, I'll give you a good example. My family, we have some art the art is, let's say, slightly above average, but it's not exceptional.
Sure.
But the story that we have behind either
the stories are good
the
too,
meeting
right?
of the artist, or the circumstances under buying it, or whatever, like, makes it so much more interesting than necessarily it is by itself. Like, if it literally just put it on a white wall in a gallery, it's like, yeah, it's a fine piece. But add that story in, and suddenly it's got an incredible depth and color, richness to it that oftentimes make, pieces more desirable in whatever way.
Right. So, again, we have our place out in Hyde County, and so the forest and the fields and the animals are really important. So in pottery, I collect fish heads. I collect birds, because that's what I see all the time, and not fish heads, but you know what I'm saying. Those are the things that mean something to me in life. And when you go in and you see it, and some of them are just whimsical, but others are nice pieces of work, really nice. Like the fish heads that guy's, that takes a lot of time and effort and really talent.
Certainly.
Yeah. So like the little painting there, that was when we went to Napa Valley, and then Jane painted those because my daughter used to we used to go get pancakes together, and so little things like that. That's the oldest house in Hyde County. That's why I bought that one.
Fair enough. Okay.
So it's still there and almost totally crumbled down now, but so that kind of then the marsh scenes and things that reminds me of certain things. And
do you ever commission work?
Yeah, John painted 4 paintings for us.
Okay.
So when he goes to paint, I'll probably commission him to do a couple of while he's up there at our house, and then hopefully Richard and somebody else can come paint in other places. And yeah,
should start an artist's residency program or something.
Yeah, we could do that.
Ooh, total random question, because I don't know anything about this, and I figured you probably would. Collecting art in relation to taxes, business taxes, how does that work? Is it a tax write-off? Is there some, like, I don't understand, because
No, unless you give it to somebody.
Okay, so it's only relevant if you give it away to
and if you sell it, then either you made a profit or you didn't,
and you pay capital gains tax,
just like any other tax, right?
Okay, so there's really sort of like no tax.
So, for instance, Manu is on loan to the museum.
Mm-hmm.
We just lent it to him.
Right.
Yeah.
So if something's on loan, is that no tax related stuff?
No, it's just we lent it to them, and they're they have to pay us. They don't have to pay us. We lent it to them for nothing. So.
What about insurance? Do you
insurance is big.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you have like separate, so you have household insurance, I'm sure, for the house and the offices, but like, do you have to have separate insurance for an art collection?
Yes, the answer is yes. Now there are some.
The answer is yes. You should.
Yeah, you should. Hey, you better. Although what the big factor would be fire, in my opinion. Who's going to steal it? Right? What are they going to do? Fence?
It would be tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or do it.
She can offense a living artist? I don't think so, right?
No, right.
It's probably not going to happen, but that's what everybody's. So we had a break in here. They came into my office, and of course, all they wanted are the TV screens and the little bit of
technology.
Yeah. And so everybody always asked me that, you worried about somebody stealing your art? I said,
I would imagine here it would be like hurricanes, so like water damage and stuff like.
Right,
Yeah, that would be my big concern.
Yeah.
Okay, so you do have to get sort of some amount of like separate.
Yeah, you've got insurance. The question is, if you're starting with, I think there's a limit of $100,000. $100,000 and below is included in your
homeowners
per piece.
Oh, well, that's nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I was told.
More than I knew. Yeah. Okay. Last little bit. So the future. What are you hoping that your collection, like, do you have some people, like artists that you're like, I hope to collect those artists in the future that you haven't been able to either get the works or find the works or whatever, and then sort of like the hope for like what it's going to do for the future in general, the collection as a whole?
I haven't really recently been studying other people at this point, but I find from time to time when you go into a gallery, a nice gallery, the mountains of North Carolina in the summertime is one of the wealthiest places on the planet. Okay, big time money.
I lived in Dubai. I beg to differ.
No, but that's one of the wealthy, right. So you have these, and so they get very fine art up there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And many fine artists live up there. So as far as finding new ones, it would be ever evolving. So for instance, Tari Stroud has Jordan Parra, and she's a sculptress. And she's got these really nice sculptures, and she's very young. You know, she's probably 26 years old, 28 years old. And so she's got a long way to go. So we'll keep watching and seeing how she progresses, and, you know, but so that, you know, yes.
So you do watch artists.
Yeah, we do.
You keep up with them.
Yeah.
Because there was this gallery in Washington, D.C. that I knew of years ago. They still exist. Hemphill Fine Arts. Love that place.
Yeah.
But the owner one time, I never know if he was joking or not. George Hemphill, he told the story. He said, "Yeah, when I find an artist, I will make a file for him, and I'll put it in my file folder, and then 10 years later, I will go back and see if they're still making work."
Yeah.
Like, so he would literally like find somebody he thinks makes good work,
right,
and wait 10 years before deciding to even represent them, much less like buy any of their stuff.
As John Bierman told me one day, he said, "Scott, this is my job." I said, "You want to go? I want to show you someplace." He goes, "This is my job. I'm working. This is it today. Okay, I can't take all day off. I mean, I gotta do this, and, you know, get the spirit going and all that kind of stuff." And so it's and so that just furthers your theme there. That because in order to get that 10 years, you got to produce a lot of works, and you got to be good, and you got to be diligent about it if you're going to be somebody that's going to be recognized. It's most like, I mean, you probably knew some kids when they were growing up that played the piano or something that were very, very good, and then they get off and they find something else and they move on, and so, you know what I'm saying? It's if you're going to take it to the next step, you got to really immerse yourself in your art.
Oh, yeah. They say 95% of people who graduate with MFAs stop making art within the first 5 years.
Correct.
So, yeah, it takes a lot of tenacity simply to continue to make art.
Right.
One way or another.
And there's so many other outlets these days, you know, all media, you know, I mean, magazines, everything is artwork, right? And
debatable, but yeah.
Well, no, you know what I'm saying. You know, just to...
There's a lot of creativity in the world.
Put that together so that it's appealing to somebody to look through, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, correct. There's a lot of unappealing stuff too.
There is a lot of crap in the world for sure.
It's Grateful Dead. I became a Deadhead when I was 40 years old. So
wait, what? Seriously?
Yeah.
So wait, then you probably never saw them.
No, I saw them in Atlanta one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I saw them in DC.
No, I mean, I always liked some of their music, but I bought a couple of albums that were live. I always liked live music because it really tells you whether the artists are good or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought a couple of live albums, and at the time I was 45 minutes on the treadmill, and so I just listened to the album and sit there and be a Deadhead.
I used to be a roadie, so I used to tour around with rock and roll bands doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so
it's interesting.
Oh, yeah. It was great times. Lots of drugs, lots of partying.
It's interesting, yeah.
But I quit that. How old am I now? 47. So I quit that almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
Been clean for 20 years or so.
That's good.
Actually, yeah, 20 years. 20 years right now.
It's nice. It's every day, isn't it?
It was Christmas Day, 1999. So, yeah, 20 years.
Wow. Awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
It's kind of boring, though.
Well, life is boring anyway, but to some degree. That's why you do all these things.
I know. This is where we pick up other hobbies to keep ourselves excited.
Well, I should say it's getting boring because, there's not much to do right now. So.
COVID makes things a bit difficult. I would imagine there's a lot of like drinking and whatever bad habits coming up.
Oh yeah, it's going to devastate a generation.
Yeah, no. I keep worrying about kids. Like their social skills are not going to be very good. Their education, they're missing out on years at this point.
They've killed a generation of minority kids. Totally.
Oh, I'm not even thinking minority, not minority. I'm just thinking kids.
That's the saddest thing that's happened since the Great Society. I mean, it just really is. You just think about they have zero support at home. They're all, it's sad. Anyway,
we're staying with art. So anyway, last little thing for me would be some idea. So if another collector or somebody who wanted to collect was listening, what kind of advice would you give to that person as far as like how to approach?
Welburn Alexander is a collector in Blowing Rock. And of course, Elliot Dangerfield lived in Blowing Rock and was probably one of the finest North Carolina painters, even though he was maybe here or there, whatever. But he lived up there for a long time. And Welburn collected 19th century American Impressionists from 1860 to 1890 or something like that.
That's a good collection.
Right. But he didn't go to 1900, right?
Right.
He didn't go to 1850. So keep your discipline in your genre and your collection. Now, you can have different types of art within that, right? So modernism, some of it was New England and they had a specific theme where it was boats and whatever, and some of it was from here or there. You know what I'm saying? But within that 19th century American Impressionism, there are a lot of stuff going on, but you keep that, and so then that collection becomes very valuable. Okay.
So, because like you had mentioned earlier that yours is living North Carolina artists. So basically yours is going to be late 20th, early 21st century North Carolina artists. That's going to be the thing that's going to sort of be your construct.
Right.
All right. Okay.
Good way to look at it.
Lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the time.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. It was great. Really good.